let's get started. Let's get started. We're going to start a little bit early. We're going to have a little bit extra time to talk during the fire drill. Remember, this is our fire drill day, and we're leaving our room at 10:30. We're going to go right down this hallway and down the stairs. I just counted them. There's 37.
37 stairs for people.
And if you don't want to go, that's okay. But whatever you do, we're going straight from here, from the fire drill. We'll probably go straight to worship. Laura and I are going to the children's area. We've got to be in the preschool.
We need prayer.
Yes. And warmer weather. We need warmer weather when we go outside. At any rate, so that's what's happening today. 2 or 3 announcements that I want to tell you about. We've got to plan a Christmas party. We got to figure out what we want to do on that coming up. But what I want to tell you before that is One Starry Night, and Anna may have some more information on it, but we are going to do memory makers this year, and that is helping people and your families with young children, etc., get ready to have their pictures taken, okay? Somebody who has good handwriting is going to need to be at 2 different sessions. There's 2 shifts, but we need 2 people with good handwriting to make sure that we get their email addresses right, because Alan Aiken and
Coleman. Is it David Coleman?
No, David, yeah, it's going to be
David Clanton. David
yeah,
Clanton.
they're going to be taking photos, and we want to make sure we can get those pictures emailed to them. So we're going to need about 3 people per shift. And what's the date of the One Starry Night?
12/16.
Okay,
December
there we go.
16th.
On the 16th, and that starts at?
Well,
Anna, you're my resource person. All I found out is we're going to do the memory makers. What's the time on it?
well, I think you can start coming in when it gets at 6.
Okay, and then Anna is going to be
6:30.
Okay,
Okay.
there you go. Anna is going to be here after church today because we have to have costumes, and she'll help people get fitted with costumes and that sort of thing. If you can't do it today, there's other times that are going to be done. Anna, what are the other times that are?
I'm putting together a schedule now because I didn't have enough volunteers, and I will have my schedule finalized today at 1 o'clock. But I can tell you for sure, today we'll be in there from as soon after service until 1. We'll be in there Tuesday, right after New Song. There'll be someone in there after New Song.
The room
for at
number?
least Tuesday. When is New? I'm sorry, Wednesday. Please excuse me. Wednesday. Wednesday is New Song.
Yeah.
So Pat Spikes and Tina Garvin will be in after New Song on Wednesday, and after Bible study, if anybody's.
And that room number is 2309.
2309. I'll be in there Wednesday evening, starting at 5:30 until I need to leave, and then we will have someone in there in the evening, starting at 5.
So we need at least 6 people, 3 per team, 3 for shift, I think, to do that, and maybe more, maybe to get people help, because they're going to have to help kids with their costumes and all that kind of thing, and get people set up, and get them lined up and get email addresses. So that's all. I told you more than I know.
Okay.
So that's it. On the fire drill, I'm going to pass this thing around. Sorry, I sat on it. It looks like it's wrinkled, but at any rate, we're going to space number 5. Okay, picture going out this door, and there's a driveway coming in off of Abrams. We're going to the right as you're walking out toward that. People from the office are going to the left on that. We need to stay out of the parking lot.
So we're going
drive
that way.
Yes, we're going to go this direction, out that way, out in this direction. But there's the driveway right here. It's here. But we just need to think about a fire truck coming in. We have to keep that clearer, and that's what we're going to be learning about. So we keep out of the way. And if you don't want to go down, stay here. Go to church when you're ready. So that's those announcements. Let me get through these. Fireside chats are tonight. If you haven't signed up, do that. It's on page 7. John Kelly preaches today and teaches today. Pretty amazing. Impressive. They're putting the pressure on you guys. Pastor Search Committee update. Okay, due to a printing error last Sunday, folder did not include the November 4th Pastor Search Committee update. It's included in the tapestry email. Okay, so anyway, they're down to 2 candidates. So, and they're interviewing people here. Okay, Adventures Day of Poetry on the 14th. The food drives continue. Thank you guys so much. We've given at least 7 baskets from our group already on that. Thank you guys for that. And the White Rock Center of Hope. Yesterday, Joe and I and Brian Rollins helped assemble some of the shelving that remember they got a grant from Wilshire. Well, part of that grant money was to put in new shelving, and it looks really nice. I just hope it sticks together. But at any rate, it's they were loading it with. I mean, Joe, they did. You made a comment. It looked like
Tom
Thumb when we left. I mean, it was. They had little shelves that were about this wide before, and I mean, it looked like my garage or something, but you know, these were very nice looking shelves that we put up, and it was a good time. Luana McKeever, you'll see on page 9, has died, and you'll see, and Mark Wingfield has written a very nice article about her in Baptist News Global. Women of Wilshire Book Club's on page 10, Wednesday night, activities on 11. Wilshire Advent theme is on page 12, and poinsettia is by November 30th. Here's the one starry night, yes, okay, there's the 6:30 to 8:30. And our WRR radio broadcast is going to be ending. That's sad. We listen to that on the way in every time, so we get to hear you sometimes on the way in. So, at any rate, that'll be different. So, than not having that. But since it was bought by KERA, there's no religious broadcasting allowed on that public radio station. So, at any rate, we'll have to find another outlets. So, anyway, that's going to be the thing. Max Post. Great, good story. You need to ask Max about Thursdays. Thursdays are special to his family. He was married on Thursday. His children were all born on Thursday. And it's a very interesting day for Max on that. And I think that's basically it. If you'll give it, we're done at 10. If you want to give it back at 10:25, we'll have a quick prayer request and we'll get out of Dodge.
May I say something real quickly?
Sure.
Go to the women's WOW brunch next time. I went yesterday. It was lovely. You will enjoy it. Okay, I'm done. If you're a woman.
Becky Wade spoke, right?
What now?
Becky Wade spoke yesterday, right?
Yes. She
I
was
saw the parking lot.
fabulous.
My dog let me know everyone was here. Yeah, so we won't got like 20, 25 minutes. So I'll just, I'm gonna read, well, first the prompt was on pride and humility. And there's also like the passages from Mark and Luke, but on a fire drill Sunday, I kept it simple, kept it to 1. So I'll read Matthew 6, 1 to 18. But before, this is the little blurb. In this piercing passage from the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addresses how even our faith and religious practices are not immune from vanity, self-consciousness, and pride. Yeah, I'll go ahead and read. So Matthew 6, 1 to 18. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms or charity, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Pray then in this way. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. And whenever you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. Truly I tell you that they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head, and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. That's a lot of instructions. So thinking about how Jesus is talking about prideful religious practices, or practicing religious practices or spiritual disciplines pridefully, I figured it would be good to set some definitions. Vanity, I read, these are all Oxford definitions. Excessive pride in or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. Self-consciousness is undue awareness of oneself, one's appearance, or one's actions. And pride is exaggerated self-esteem, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements or from qualities or possessions that are widely admired. So what's the common thread between those?
Emphasis on self.
Yeah. It's seems like all of these things are like ultimately centering ourselves, our own interests, or it's that weird thing too where it's centering yourself, not in service, that's not the right word, but for others, or out of a desire to get a specific response from others, whether that's like respect or awe or what have you. And then I looked up a definition of humility and didn't find the definitions that satisfying. The most common one was a modest or low view of one's own importance. Is that how you guys would define humility?
No.
Neither. How would you guys define it? If
I
you
think
had.
that is more of a healthier perspective than what we were just talking about, sort of self-absorption. Not that I am an unimportant person, but I'm also not the center of the universe.
Yeah, yeah. So humility is more like attention. And I feel like anytime humility is mentioned, Lewis's definition of it is shared, but C.S. Lewis described it as not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less.
Yes.
Which I really like that. So we had, yeah, I'm just trying to keep a view on time. I'm not the best at that.
I want to go back to pride just for a minute. As an example to me, I have no reason to be, but or the ability to be, but I'm very proud of all you guys as residents. You know, that's maybe I'm using the wrong word there, but you know, I'm not your parent. You know, but you know, I'm very proud of what people like you and Brianna and those who came before you have done, and that's a source of pride for me. But that's, I don't know, maybe that's not the right use of.
I think you can use it in a negative connotation, or use it in a denotated way, right? Or like taking pride in your work, you know, like
Yes, yes.
not in an obnoxious way,
Yeah,
but like you want to do your work well, because that then is a witness to the gospel. Like
Yeah.
if you do a shabby job all the time, then your testimony is destroyed, you know, not destroyed, but
Yeah.
it's tainted, I feel like.
Thinking of this, there's this band that I like, the Avett Brothers, and they have this song with a lyric that goes something like, I want to have pride like my mama had, but not like the kind in the Bible that turns you bad. So I found, like, it really does depend on how you use it, but I think how you use it is determined on what is the center of it, of what's driving that pride. Whether, it reminds me of Paul saying, like, I boast in Christ alone. I think you could say, like, I have pride in that alone ultimately. And like a lot of these things, it's human nature, and we can't fully avoid it or fully, like, I'm perfect, I think of myself the appropriate amount and others the appropriate amount. We're reacting to situations or experiences we find ourselves in. So none of this is like, if you don't have this, you're not good. You're like, you gotta work on it. Because that's kind of, you guys looked through the Sermon on the Mount a few weeks ago, and hopefully I'm not disagreeing with whoever taught that. But it's Jesus painting this, not idealistic and an like never gonna happen, airy-fairy, marshmallowy way, but he's painting a portrait of life in God's kingdom, the age to come, or God's reign, whatever you want to call it. So he's presenting these ironic, inverted values and describing the behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes of those who are citizens of this kingdom. So it's so easy for Christians to paint ourselves in this light as like never angry, as like social justice warriors, as children of God who feel blessed even when they mourn. But that's not really realistic if we're honest with ourselves. If you've ever mourned, I doubt it felt like a blessing at first. I'm sure I'm not the only one who can find themselves angry. It's hard to control. This is a confession, a weird transition, but you know, Jesus talks about lust or promise keeping or being true to your word, being generous to those who force your hand. So a lot of that is, when I read it, it hits me like, oof, I don't always do that, or that's not my gut instinct. And I think that's okay, just to remember the context of this passage. And related to that, thinking of how I could summarize a solution, because it seems like growing up in a lot of different church contexts, it's either like you are the worm that eats dead bodies, or like you are perfect as you are. And it seems like both of those are missing a piece of the puzzle. And this theologian, theologian who started, I think it's in New York, Mockingbird Ministries, and his name's David Zoll, and he wrote a book called Low Anthropology, The Unlikely Key to a Gracious View of Others and Yourself. And he suggests that low anthropology, which anthropology is just how we see humanity, how we characterize humanity. And he suggests that low anthropology, which he defines as the belief that the human spirit is fallible and veers by default in a malign direction, and as a result cannot flourish without assistance or constraint. And he says that this offers hope, ironically, because it casts mistakes and setbacks as inescapable parts of life, rather than just the result of personal failings. And that those critical of themselves and others, which is a byproduct of pride, because if we expect ourselves only to be perfect, to only be able to take pride in what we do and how we do it, that we believe we're defined by our best days and our greatest achievements, and that we're capable of whatever we want to do. It's a perspective that results in disappointment and feelings of inadequacy. And that's not at all what I think Jesus is trying to do here, is to shame people. He's just trying to really paint who we're becoming, who the Spirit of God allows us to become. And I like like this quote. He says, "This is the great irony of low anthropology," or what I would say like a realistic view of ourselves, not one that beats ourselves up, but just looks at it honestly. And he said, "What sounds insulting is actually liberating. And what sounds liberating at first, this high anthropology, is actually oppressive and embittering. But low anthropology shifts a person's hopes from their own internal resources like willpower, discipline, natural energy level, to external possibilities. It opens a person to the outside world, to the possibility of love and the surprise of grace. And that there is an inherent God-given dignity to every creature on the planet, but that this side of eternity, that goodness has been distorted such that it often takes the form of inner conflict, of self-centeredness, what we might call pride today." So does any of that resonate with you guys, how your experience of, you don't have to say your own if you don't want to be that vulnerable, but I know we've all dealt with prideful people. And I feel like a lot of the harshest critics or most cutting individuals can be those who are like, we're all good, we're perfect, we're da-da-da. And if you know the Enneagram or any of that, a lot of ones are this way where they're perfectionists, and then they realize they're not perfect, they realize no one around them is perfect, and they kind of crumble, and they're like, oh, it should not be this way, and just kind of sit there and do nothing. But does that resonate with any of your thoughts, or do you disagree with it?
What about pride in, for instance, I've heard some churches will say the great, or even the greater, name their church, you know, I'm not gonna name any. But, and Wiltshire's always avoided that, I feel like, and, I think that, you know, the pride can, in other words, kind of group pride, and, it become, you theoretically are not centering on yourself, but on your group,
Yeah.
in the church. And, Wiltshire's been pretty modest about that. When they don't have to brag about it, they don't say anything much.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, pride can, Jesus talks about this, which I have some words that I would clarify, but Jesus talks about these hypocrites. He's not talking about Jewish people in general, and he's not saying like all of these people are going out. But I think it does include some Jewish leaders, and then he mentions even Gentiles. But I found it interesting that the word translated as hypocrites literally means stage actors. So what does reading it with that translation make you think of? If, say, and whenever you pray, do not be like the stage actors, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, da-da-da.
It's very neatly into the sentence there, because they're clearly putting on an act.
Yeah.
They're doing it not out of a sense of genuineness, but out of a hope that others will see them the way they want to be seen.
Yeah.
I've always thought of that, Travis, as these television evangelists. They may not even believe everything they're saying, but it makes them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I had a friend that was from Tulsa that he worked, when he worked his way through college, he worked as a teller in a branch bank or something up there, and he hated it when Oral Roberts would cry, because he would get all these napkins of nickels and dimes and pennies, all the next week that he would have to count, and it was just amazing, the trying to pull everybody's guilt strings or something, or just to get what they want. So
Yeah. Jesus talks about this a couple times where he's like, they perceive their reward. But your Father who sees in secret will reward you in secret. And I found it interesting, which verse is it? Verse 6. A lot of like the King James Version and some older but not like ancient translations, they add, will reward you openly, because they didn't like that, the notion that you might not receive a reward for what you do ever this side of eternity.
Who said that?
Well,
Reward you?
like the King James Version
Oh.
and some different translations add to the end of verse 6. Like, your Father sees you in secret, but he's going to reward you openly. So, like, you're going to be vindicated against these people, or you're going to be proven right. But that doesn't seem to be an interest of Matthew broadly, of like this worldly reward. And that can make me uncomfortable. How does that make you guys feel?
Robert's Kung's and he had a list at his service, at his dinner, his celebration of life dinner. His very first proverb or statement that he liked was try to do nice things for people and try not to get caught.
And I think he did that for sure. So I guess what does this kind of looking for a reward of praise from others versus this secret reward from God, what does this kind of imply about the praise of others, do you guys think? Or about the Father's reward? Or how does it feel to be asked to give without any chance of a return on investment? And like, what would that add to your understanding of pride?
Well, I think the fact that we shouldn't be seeking the praise of others is maybe so our focus is more on God. Because I think, the things we do to please others are maybe not part of what He would rather we be doing.
Yeah, and I think that touches on, especially in the Old Testament and in the Gospels, it's picked up, especially by the ones writing to Jewish audiences. But the pride of the people in the Old Testament is attached to idolatry, is attached to taking God out of the center and either putting themselves or other gods or strategies, anything like that, in the center. But I think it's kind of a slippery slope. We can't always like see clearly sometimes until we see the effects of it, that we are idolizing something or not trusting God most fully. So it's kind of another of that tension where it does feel uncomfortable to say, well, do this and you'll get a reward later, versus, well, you could get this reward of the praise of others, but how fickle is that praise? You could do this for any other reasons of validation or vindication, but you're going to have to do that cycle all over again in a couple weeks if you keep at it and if you look for that contentment and fulfillment from anything but God. And I think that's what Jesus is really nailing down, not just in chapter 6, but throughout all of the Sermon on the Mount, is that centering God will make you look like a fool sometimes, because of how self-centered the values of our society really is. But that's not the most hopeful, or like, it's hard to talk people into that lifestyle apart from an experience of God. Apart from, I know it, like, I'm so encouraged when like prideless people will come to me and encourage me or pray for me or XYZ, just not out of a desire for me to be like, oh, you're so great, you're the best. Even though it does kind of elicit that, really it just, like, there are people who encourage me and I'll think they're great, but as I'm thinking that, my mind just like automatically shifts to God because of the way they live their lives, of not like putting themselves down or being like, I'm human garbage. But they know that they are who they are because of who God is and how they relate to God. And then Jesus goes on to the prayer that really functions as the core of the Sermon on the Mount. It's kind of central, and we look at that like Jewish X pattern from the Old Testament. This prayer is kind of, let's see, too many notes. It's just simple, and it's not really to heap up our own needs on God, like he says. It's not really to prove ourselves to others, to be eloquent, to be wordy, which if anyone's done prayers of the people, you know that pressure is there. Like, I don't want to sound dumb in front of these people. But if all of that's not the point of prayer, if even presenting our own needs to God isn't the point of prayer, if God already knows our needs, what would you guys guess the point is? Or what's the purpose?
Prayer is always to change us, not God.
Yeah, I think that it's telling you, don't do whatever it is you're going to do, all these various things, to get the attention of your fellow man. Don't worry about that. God already knows what's going to happen. And if he does, you know, you're doing it for his purposes and not the people around you. And sometimes you think, well, if he already knows, why do I even have to communicate with him? So I sometimes think the scriptures are trying to tell you one thing and they may be trying to tell you something else. And, you know, it even says, well, sometimes when you're praying to God, you may not even be able to voice it where you think God understands, but don't worry about that either. He already knows. But go ahead and communicate anyway. But I think this whole thing is trying to say, don't do any of this stuff for recognition of mankind. Do it for God, and you don't have to verbalize it. He already knows why you're doing it. You're doing it for him.
And that reminds me of this, I think she was about 90, and she was at my last church in Pasadena, and her husband had passed away, but he was this like very well-known theology professor at Fuller, and she would just name drop like when we had dinner with Brueggemann or whatever, and all these like theological rock stars. But then, like, all of that could be very intimidating. But then I was in a prayer meeting with her, and she asked for the needs, and everyone went around, shared, and she's like, "All right, let me pray." And I forget exactly what she said, but basically like, God, all that, and then just like left. And she's like, don't you guys realize that God is listening to us all the time? Or, you know, like she really embodied this, which I find myself not doing all the time. I'm like, all right, God. It's like I slump in God's office chair or something like this and this and this, and you won't even believe this and this. And that, if we think about it and sit with that, is kind of the seeds of pride. Well, we're not remembering God is always present to us. We're not remembering God is always at the center, even if we're not cognizant of it. Even if, like you were saying, even if we're not praying to align ourselves with God or to change ourselves, God is still in the center. It's just a matter of recognizing and living because of that.
prayer in itself is an act of humility, I think, you know, like.
I like that. Yeah, can you say more about that?
Well, when you, like, I guess, like what Don was saying, you know, God already knows it, but sometimes when you have to verbalize it, it just emphasizes our need for God more. You know, verbalize or, you know, silently
Yeah,
acknowledge that. And it
yeah.
reminds us, because it's easy to just go through our day, but then if you don't stop and when you stop and pray, or even when you go and pray, like you're acknowledging God's continual presence with you.
Yeah, and I think we're about to have a fire drill, but I would close with that the answer to pride is acknowledging our need of God. And not in ways that beat ourselves up, but in ways that just look at the facts of who we are and the experiences we've gone through. And I know I need God every day. So I will
Thank you, John.
see you guys.
Yeah,
From-
we'll listen to you in a few minutes.
Yeah. And I think I'm back in December.
Well, you were the 18th, but that got canceled and you're just somebody else, yeah, so,
Oh,
yeah.
well,
Thank you,
should have saved your
John.
joke for that.
I didn't do, no, John, that was not my joke. I didn't do that one. I can't take credit for that one.
All right, let's go through these quickly, and we may get interrupted because I think we've got about 1 minute. Again, anybody who does not want to go on the fire drill, we don't, we're going out that door in a minute. Pastor Search Committee, we'll continue to pray for them. Kay, as she continues to battle cancer. Luana Robinson, Laura, we saw her on Monday. She's going to enter physical therapy. She actually broke her shoulder, not a bone in her arm. It was her shoulder. And so they had drainage. That's why she had to stay in the hospital until that quit draining after the surgery. And then she's starting physical therapy now. Vicki Con Beasley is traveling in Mexico. Barbara Floyd starts chemo in a few weeks on that particular one, and we'll pray for you and your family on that. Vicki's son's mother-in-law that we prayed for about surgery. Surgery went well, but the pathology came back that it's invasive cancer, so not good in that sense. So the recovery was supposed to be very, very difficult, not the surgery so much, but at any rate, that's not a good, not an expected outcome. Laura and Ray Snow are celebrating their 36th anniversary today, and they're in Branson, and so we'll pray for safe travels for them as they travel and go to and from. Heather stuck her head in this morning and said we need to pray for Jonathan McGregor. He's a fairly new Wilshire member. He's a professor at SMU and has colon cancer. I mean, in his 30s.
Stage 4.
Huh?
Stage 4.
Oh, yeah, and they're going to MD Anderson this week, and so way too early. Okay, that's it, we're out.
What do we do, right?
Well, Diana has a friend, Sue Beasley, in South Carolina.
How's Kate?
We're getting there.
How's Kate?
Thank you very much. You have a great day tomorrow.
You too.